And with that, we'll move on to Browns-Colts, a game that my pickup line was the under. And this game
I bought it, by the way. I mean,
over.
I believed in that line. I agreed with you.
A shocking game, really on multiple fronts. The Browns' defense, what Gardner Minshew was able to do, how efficient he was. Jonathan Taylor gets the touchdown on 18 carries and 75 yards. He also had 3 catches for 45 yards. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of conversation at the end of this game about some of the calls, whatever. From a fantasy perspective right now, good day from the Colts offense in a brutal matchup. I
mean, listen, I'm going to, you know what I'm doing? I'm patting myself on the back. This is what I'm doing.
Taking the under?
No. I did take the under. That one's a bad call. I had Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss on the hate list. That was a bad call. I thought this was going to be a low-scoring game. That was all bad calls. But I did have Josh Downs on the love list.
There we go.
So there you go. I got one out of 5 in that game of the calls that I made. There is clearly a connection as we've talked about Josh Downs here for a long time. He's the 3rd best wide receiver in fantasy as we head into Monday Night Football. Over 100 receiving yards, his first career game. So far this year with Gardner Minshew, we keep talking about this connection between him and Minshew. A 22% target share, double-digit fantasy points in 4 of the last 5 games to the rookie. We've talked about him a lot, Connor, in terms of just what a perfect fit he is as kind of a PPR slot guy.
He's been phenomenal. He can really, we saw him win down the field yesterday, which to me was really, really promising. And Gardner Minshew picked up on a free play and hit downs. And when you look at the rookie wide receivers right now, I mean, you're talking about Puka Nacua, of course. Mm-hmm. Josh Downs is right in the mix as one of the most productive rookie wide receivers right now, and that's only trending upwards, Jay. This is going to continue with Gardner being the starter for the rest of the season.
Yep, 100% agree. And I think from this game, the most interesting, both football and fantasy element is just how real was that Browns defensive performance? Because, you know, we're putting guys like Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, you know, not on the shelf because it was Bipocalypse, but, you know, shelf adjacent because of the matchup.
I had Taylor at 18 and on the hate list. And I said basically, you got to start him, but just lower expectations. And that was wrong because he was great.
So you think about the Browns defense and compare that to, 2 weeks into the season, everyone's like, oh, this Cowboys defense is one of the best defenses of all time. And you look at the names, it's like, it makes sense. All right, Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Trayvon Diggs, Stephon Gilmore. You always looked at the Browns off defense, and it's like, all right, well, Myles Garrett's amazing, but outside of that, it's like, I like Greg Newsome. I think he's pretty solid. Denzel Ward had a down year last year. Maybe he's back. But, Connor, do you think this Browns defense is, you know, the all-world unit that it was statistically through the first 6 weeks, or is it a little vulnerable?
I think you go back to last year and think of their one big problem is that you could run on the interior. And they cleaned up a lot of that this year. They went to the offseason. They got Jim Schwartz. They cleaned up a lot of that. But you could still see some of the leaky faucet there. And that's what I want to see how teams test them. In this game, when you look at the Colts, 18 carries for Jonathan Taylor, 18 carries for Zach Moss. Gardner Minshew was effective running in the red zone. That's the thing I want to see how the Browns react because it can't just all be Myles Garrett, Jay.
Yep. And to be fair, Myles Garrett did almost win the game by himself in the first half. He had 2 strip sacks, one that led to a touchdown, and then blocked a field goal as well. Right now on DraftKings, he's 3rd favorite for Defensive Player of the Year. 3rd. He should be 1st with a bullet. He is the best defensive player in the game right now and played like it yesterday. Outside of that for the Colts, I mean, Minshew, I think the passing game for the Colts was a little bit more fluky. Really bad missed tackle on Michael Pittman for that long reception. And Minshew, I mean, he's going to provide more value through the air to the receivers than Anthony Richardson did, but I'm not too excited about it.
He's you know, listen, the 2 rushing touchdowns were nice, but not something you would expect to happen. He's a nice bye-week fill-in. But I think the positives is that if you roster Michael Pittman, if you have the running backs, if you have Josh Downs, he's going to be good enough to keep them afloat fantasy-wise. We've thought this all along. To me, the big story of this game, other than just the shocking nature of it and the crazy back and forth and like one what we thought was elite defense and one we thought was solid defense and certainly should have been better against P.J. Walker. The fact that, you know, almost 80 points were scored in this game. What I will say is I think the running backs. Let's start with Indianapolis. This is now Jonathan Taylor's backfield. So, I mean, you know, again, 21 touches, 120 total yards. That was a season high for him as well. It was also a season high snap rate for him as well. You see it there on your screen, 49% to 51% for Zach Moss in terms of the snaps. But that's again, Jonathan Taylor's, he went from 10 snaps to like 20 to like 41, I think now at 49. I expect that next week he will lead the team in snaps. Zach Moss still playing well, by the way. Zach Moss is still playing well, but Taylor has the big day here as well in terms of that. He gets in the end zone and, of course, immediately gets drug tested. as soon as he gets the end zone, as Jonathan Taylor tweets out. Very funny. Back-to-back games with 4 more targets and 45 receiving yards, which is exciting as well. Taylor's usage in the passing game. I don't think Zach Moss goes away, but they play the Saints next week, which is not a great matchup, but neither was the Browns, and they both did that. Again, they're committed to the run under Gardner Minshew. So, I think Taylor starting next week is an RB1, and Zach Moss is still like a viable flex.
Yep, agreed.
A strong day for the Browns backfield as well. Both Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt finish as top 13 running backs. Deshaun Watson gets hurt in this game. P.J. Walker comes in. Pretty good workload.
That was weird too, by the way, because he goes out for the concussion protocol. He clears the concussion protocol, right? But then they stick with P.J. Walker?
I know, but they couldn't rule out Deshaun because if Walker got injured, then they needed him to come in. But it's like, well, if Patrick Mahomes had gotten cleared, I think Patrick Mahomes is coming back in the game. I think that the key there is that Deshaun looked terrible before he got concussed.
Yeah. He's bad. Concussed. Let's just be open about this. Deshaun Watson is a bad NFL quarterback right now. He's
certainly playing like it.
The sample size as a Brown has been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league.
He had one really good game against the Titans. Outside of that, every game has been bad for Deshaun, and he didn't look right with the shoulder yesterday.
In fairness, $250 million does not buy what it used to these days. Inflation, everything like
true.
that.
Things are a little different now.
Exactly.
If they'd spent that $250 million on Russell Wilson, they might win the Super Bowl this year. Wilson at least is looking competent.
It's a grim conversation.
That is a grim conversation. That is very grim. By the way, they could have saved 249 billion of that, 249 million of that, and just gotten Minshew or Josh Dobbs.
Not trade Josh Dobbs.
Honestly, just not even trade Josh Dobbs, and they'd have been fine.
Maybe they could trade back for him now. Anyways, one thing we'll keep an eye on.
Jacoby Brissett, honestly, they should have just. Honestly, they should have. In real talk, they should have just re-signed Jacoby Brissett. But
one thing we'll keep an eye on throughout the week on this game is Jerome Ford with an ankle injury was seen in a protective boot after the game. That's from the Athletics' Zach Jackson, who covers the team. So we'll have a lot of updates throughout the week on that.
Stefanski said that Watson will play. He will be the starter next week. He's fine.
So that'll be fine. But to your point, Jerome Ford had a really nice game here. Had the big 69-yard touchdown in the very first minute of the game. But the ankle injury that you mentioned happened in the fourth quarter. I just think this is, and we'll get more into this tomorrow during waiver wire, but Pierre Strong came in, played 61% of the snaps after Jerome Ford went down. It'll be Kareem Hunt and Pierre Strong in that order if Jerome Ford has to miss time. Again, they play the Seahawks next week and then Arizona. So be interesting. We'll get more into that tomorrow on the Waiver Wire show.
Our next game, the Lions traveled to Baltimore, and it did not go well for them as Lamar Jackson went wild. 21 of 27 for 357 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 9 carries for 36 yards and another touchdown. Jay, is Lamar right back in the MVP race after this monster performance?
I think so. I think he's the second favorite behind Patrick Mahomes, who we will get to. This is the best Lamar has looked to me since 2019 when he won MVP unanimously. And we've been waiting for this high-octane Todd Monken offense. Well, it finally surfaced against what to this point had been a pretty good Detroit Lions defense. But, I mean, this game was all about Lamar. He was magnificent on the ground, but particularly through the air with the 357 passing yards. 21 of 27, gets the 3 touchdowns as well, and he looked all world, Connor.
He really did. I was just sorry to jump in here. I was just going to say, because Lamar's been inconsistent. I did a thing on the post game show where they asked me about Lamar, and we were talking about this. And I said, he's had a couple of games with over 28 fantasy points, and then he's had a couple where less than 15. He's been very up and down this entire year. This is the most fantasy points he's had a game in since week 3 of last year as well. They play Arizona next, then they're home to Seattle, home to a suddenly vulnerable-looking Cleveland Browns defense, and then they play the Bengals on Thursday Night Football. So the schedule's lining up for if it's all come together in this Monken offense, which we think it is. One last thing I just want to say before we move off of. So Lamar, I agree. Potential league winner the rest of the way, the guy that you draft him be. Shout out to Lawrence Jackson, though, because when we did shot for shot on Fantasy Football pregame, one of his shots was 350 total yards and 4 touchdowns for Lamar Jackson. Call your shot, hit your shot. Props to Lawrence Jackson. Come on. Lord don't lose.
That's a great call
Lord
by
won
Lawrence.
that.
Lord does not lose. Listen, one positive from this game for the Lions, and there was a lot of negatives from Aaron Glenn's defense. But on the offensive side of the ball, no David Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs, 11 carries, 68 yards, 9 catches for 58 additional yards. That's the Jahmyr Gibbs we were expecting.
Exactly. Career high 10 targets this week. He came into the week with 18 targets all season long. So using him in the passing game and seeing him get Kamara-like usage without without just dump offs, but actually like big plays. He saw 86% of the snaps with David Montgomery out, 74% of the snaps in the 2 games without David Montgomery, and we expect Montgomery to miss a couple of more games here. And so, yes, this was the Jahmyr Gibbs breakout game that we've been waiting for. It's awesome to see. In a game in which much did not go right for the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs was a bright spot.
Chargers, Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes, monster day, 34-42, 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That Chiefs offense, Jay, was absolutely in control. Here's the craziest thing about Mahomes and Kelsey right now. At one point against the Chargers, Kelsey and Mahomes connected on 28 straight targets dating back to Week 5. Per Next Gen Stats, the odds of that happening, 0.03%.
Yeah,
these guys are locked in.
That's quite low. We're just watching this game, and I think I watched just about every second of this because I'm watching every Chiefs game, so I have all these Mahomes MVP tickets, and just watching the game.
And you're a Swiftie.
And I'm a Swiftie. Yes. That's the other part of that. Just watching the game, it became clear that Mahomes is just so much better at the sport than everyone else is. This is like watching Roger Federer in 2006. Yeah. It's like watching Usain Bolt. He's just that much better, and just the confidence that he's going to make the right play. His line, 34 of 42 for 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. He left money on the table in this. Kelsey had a bad drop. There was a fumble that killed off scoring drive approaching the red zone. Mahomes, even the interception that he threw, he's just so smart in understanding what wins football games. Like, he is the one guy in the league who just, on 3rd and long, if he's got nothing on, I'm throwing it deep. Because maybe I can draw a pass interference, right, maybe there'll be a play, and it's an interception, and it doesn't matter because it was just a punt, basically. He's just playing at such an insane level right now. Kelsey is right, and to me, Matthew, the big story out of the game, though, from a fantasy perspective, is Rashee Rice continues to trend upwards.
1,000%. He's now had 60 more receiving yards in back-to-back games, his 3rd straight game with double-digit fantasy points. He scored a touchdown in 2 of the last 3 games. A season-high 59% snap rate. We keep saying this. I've been saying this all season long. Rashee Rice is coming. This is going to be a thing. This is going to be a thing. Well, I think it's now a thing, right? 6 targets on the game, as you see it there on your screen. More than MVS, more than Isaiah Pacheco. The only pass catcher that had more targets on the Chiefs is, of course, number 87. And so Rashee Rice feels like they have found something. They, and I think we have seen this in fantasy for a long time. I think back last year in terms of Christian Watson, in terms of Chris Olave, rookie wide receivers that sort of started dominating over the second half of the year. Rashee Rice obviously doesn't have the pedigree that those guys do, but he does have the quarterback and the offensive system around him, and not a lot of competition for targets outside of Kelsey. So this is a real thing. This is a real thing. As we head into Monday Night Football, he's the 13th best wide receiver in fantasy.
Yep. And Connor, I think just looking at just the way that the box score broke down for Kansas City, this is how the offense should look. Yep. Kelsey is the monster. He gets the share of the targets. Rashee Rice is your wide receiver 1. Then MVS is kind of the next guy. And then you give Pacheco and McKinnon some work in the passing game. It's been so uneven to this point, the Chiefs offense, it finally clicked yesterday.
Yeah, it feels like the Sky Moore experiment, too.
They're like, we're done.
They're trying to make it a thing so many times, and they can't make it a thing.
Yeah, and they brought back Mecole Hardman. Okay, great, and he'll increase some stats, but he's gonna have a couple. He's gonna have a package. He'll play some special teams, be fine. But yeah, I agree with you right there. The only thing that was crazy to me was just how open Kelsey was. It's like, this is not a new thing, Brandon Staley. Like, at some point, maybe double him, maybe triple him.
Not sure Staley's going to be the coach when these teams play again.
I mean, dude, like, it was just like he was just wide open, and part of that on Kelsey, just the brilliance of him finding gaps in the zone and just being able to like be somewhere, and him and Mahomes just kind of playing playground basketball out there. But still, like, dude, what are you doing?
It was a disappointing game for the Chargers, and it wasn't just their defense. It was from a fantasy perspective. Justin Herbert comes in as QB 20. Not a good game for Herbert. Austin Eckler under 6 points. Not a top 35 running back as it stands right now. If you're looking for anything, Josh Palmer is the guy, not Quentin Johnston when Mike Williams got hurt. 5 catches for 133 yards for Josh Palmer. Quentin Johnston, 2 targets.
24% target share since week number 4. So 100%. Like, he's a legit part of an offense that's clearly going to be needing to throw quite a bit. Bad day at the office for Herbert and Eckler. You're not worried about. They play Chicago next week.
Watching Herbert on the sideline now, he's kind of grown out the facial hair. He reminds me of Andy Roddick just watching Roger Federer across on the other sideline because Mahomes is just a little bit better.
Is that our second Federer?
To be fair, it was part of the same kind of cogent.
Two tennis comps.
I'm
in one day.
just old tennis comps too.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
I've got a
like,
Pete Sampras one coming later.
The NBA
you.
comps are
Great.
out.
How
Tennis
about
comps are
Bjorn
out.
Borg?
Yeah.
Yvonne Lundell? Do you want to just let's like really alienate our entire audience, like people that have no one ever heard of. Anyway, the Chargers play the Bears next Sunday night right here on NBC and Peacock.
Blockbuster. Last one on this game.
Yeah.
Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert.
Well, that's why there's betting in fantasy.
Exactly. And part of that, so Justin Herbert has left about 150 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns on the table for Keenan Allen in the past week, just with bad throws.
Yeah.
So Keenan
There was
Allen,
one that was wide open.
He is a lot better1 his stats.
All right.
Last game quickly here, guys. The Steelers at the Rams. Another game that kind of went much differently than many of us thought. We'll start with the backfield. Darrell Henderson, brought from the practice squad, 18 carries, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Really no ramping up Darrell Henderson. Royce Freeman gets 12 carries for 66 yards. Zach Evans didn't play a snap.
No, I mean, dude, for everyone that spent a lot of fab on Zach Evans, like, it's crazy. But we talked about this on Fantasy Football Pregame extensively. If you missed it, where we talked about that it was going to be Henderson and Freeman. Henderson ends up getting the touchdown. I mean, Freeman played 42% of the snaps. He got 12 for 66.
Yeah, he was fine.
It was a little bit of he was fine. Henderson's the one who converts it. 58% of the snaps. He had 19 touches. His most touches since Week 12, 2021. You're saying activated from the practice squad. Activated from his couch.
Yes.
Like a week ago, he was sitting at home watching Fantasy Football Pregame drinking Dollaritas, I'm assuming.
In a Matthew Berry costume.
Yeah, in a Matthew Berry costume. So Henderson, and it is just as we talked about on Fantasy Football Pregame, like McVay is generally fairly honest, and he talked up Henderson, he talked up Freeman. He was kind of like Zach Evans. Zach's continuing to learn. He was just very lukewarm here. So that, I think, obviously is the answer going forward. It'll be Henderson and Freeman. We'll talk about more of them tomorrow on the Waiver Wire show. Another huge game for Puka Nacua. I think the important thing here is, so great, Puka's a stud, we know that. Deontay Johnson makes his return here as well, and his first game back since Week 1, a 26% target share. He's played 2 games this year. He has at least 6 targets. You see Puka there on your screen as I'm talking up Deontay Johnson, but because I'm trying to whip through this quickly. But I'm not worried about Cooper Kupp. I guess he'll be fine.
I don't know why they just didn't throw the ball more in this game. They ran it a little bit too much. Last thing here, my man, Najee Harris, who have staked my... Michael Thomas gets in the end zone on Thursday.
What a week for Jay.
Najee Harris,
Everything's coming up, Jay.
My 2 best friends, my family members, MT and NH, as I call them.
Najee Harris, RB12 right now, Jay. Selling high?
Superstar.
Selling high? Okay, write it out.
Buying more shares.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I think it was fine. I think this backfield is what it is.
Fine. It's magnificent. 14 for 53. Love that.
Look, 57% of the team snaps, which is the most since Week 2. This is great. He's now had 15 or more touches in 5 straight games, so that's positive. I mean, the workload's there. I still would rather have Jaylen Warren. But yes, Najee Harris suddenly useful.
Yes.
Useful. He's like a young Matthew Berry out there. Useful. Not great, but useful. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.